The world is watching two big leaders, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, and Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine. Their story and meeting is important. It is about war, peace, and working together. This video tells you what happens when they meet and talk in February 2025. It is a big moment for them and for many countries. Trump and Zelensky are different, but they have a job to do. There is a war in Ukraine. It is hard for everyone. Many soldiers die. Cities break. People are scared. Trump wants the fighting to stop. He says he can make a deal. Zelensky wants help to save his country. He needs America to be strong for Ukraine. This makes their talks very serious. Why does this matter? The war is not just Ukraine's problem. It changes things for the whole world. Countries watch to see if Trump and Zelensky can find answers. Will there be peace? Will America and Ukraine work well together? These questions are big, and this video looks at them carefully. Trump likes to talk about peace. He says he is good at making deals. He thinks he can stop the war fast. Zelensky fights for his people every day. He knows war is hard, and he wants it to end, but he also wants Ukraine to stay safe. Both men have ideas. Both want something good. But it is not easy. This story starts with a meeting. Trump asks Zelensky to come to the White House. They talk about a deal. It is about minerals in Ukraine that America wants. It is also about stopping the war. Russia is part of this too. Trump talks to Putin, the leader of Russia. Zelensky does not trust Putin. This makes everything harder. You will see how Trump and Zelensky start, what they say, and what they want. You will read about soldiers, money, and plans for the future. Some moments are happy, some are not. This is not a story about good or bad people. It is about real life. Trump and Zelensky are leaders with big jobs. They try to fix problems. Sometimes they agree. Sometimes they don't. The war makes everything loud and fast. But this video stays quiet. It does not pick sides. It shows you the facts and lets you think. Because this video is only for education. Why should one care about this? Because it is about today. The war in Ukraine touches many places. America helps with money and weapons. Europe watches closely. What Trump and Zelensky do can change all of this. Maybe they bring peace, maybe they don't. You will see how they try. So, let's begin. Trump and Zelensky meet in February 2025. The world waits. The second meeting. In February 2025, the White House was ready for an important visitor. President Zelensky of Ukraine arrived in Washington, D.C. for his first official meeting with President Trump. The world watched closely. There were many big problems to talk about, especially the ongoing war in Ukraine. President Trump greeted President Zelensky warmly at the West Wing entrance. They shook hands for the cameras. Both leaders looked serious but polite. They walked inside together, ready to start their talks. The meeting began in the Oval Office. It was a serious room, filled with important symbols of the United States. President Trump sat behind his large desk. President Zelensky sat opposite him with their teams on each side. The atmosphere was formal, but also hopeful. President Trump started the conversation. He welcomed President Zelensky to the White House. He said it was important for them to meet face to face. He mentioned the difficult situation in Ukraine and said the United States wanted to help find a solution. President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the invitation. He spoke about the war in his country. He explained the challenges Ukraine was facing every day. He emphasized the need for peace, but also for a fair agreement that respected Ukraine's interests. The early part of their discussion focused on the war. They talked about the human cost of the conflict, the soldiers and the civilians affected. President Trump listened carefully as President Zelensky described the situation on the ground. President Zelensky expressed his hope that the United States could play a role in bringing the war to an end. Both leaders agreed that ending the war was a top priority. They talked about the possibility of a peaceful resolution. President Trump spoke about his belief in negotiation and finding common ground. President Zelensky stressed the importance of justice and fairness in any peace deal. In their initial statements, there were signs of cooperation. Both presidents spoke about shared goals. They both wanted to see peace in Ukraine. They both talked about the importance of a stable and secure Europe. It seemed they were starting from a position of wanting to work together. After the meeting in the Oval Office, the two presidents made brief public statements. President Trump said to reporters, "We had a very good first meeting. We are beginning to understand each other's positions. We both want to see an end to the conflict. It will not be easy, but we are going to try." President Zelensky also spoke. He said, "This first meeting was important. I believe President Trump is serious about peace. We have a long way to go, but this is a positive start. Ukraine wants a just peace, and we hope to work with the United States to achieve that." The first meeting ended. It was just the beginning of a long and complex process. But the initial impressions were of a willingness to engage and find solutions. The world waited to see what would happen next. The stakes were very high, and the path to peace was uncertain. However, the first meeting offered a glimmer of hope for future cooperation. 3. The agreement talks. After the first meeting, President Trump and President Zelensky started to talk about an agreement. This agreement was important for both countries. The talks happened in meeting rooms in Washington, D.C. Many people from both the U.S. and Ukraine were there. They talked for many hours each day. Ukraine wanted a strong agreement. President Zelensky said Ukraine needed more help from the United States. He wanted the U.S. to support Ukraine against Russia. For Ukraine, this was the most important thing. Ukraine wanted security. They wanted to feel safe from any more problems with Russia. They also talked about resources. Ukraine has important minerals in the ground. These are called rare earth minerals. These minerals are used to make many things like phones and computers. Ukraine was ready to work with the U.S. on these minerals. The United States also had important things they wanted. President Trump said the U.S. wanted to help bring peace. He wanted to find a way to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine. This was not easy. President Trump also wanted to protect the interests of the United States. This means he wanted to make sure the agreement was good for America too. The U.S. was interested in security, not just in Europe, but also for itself. The U.S. team talked about how the agreement could help America's security. During the talks, it was clear that both sides had different main goals. Ukraine was focused on getting strong support to protect itself from Russia. The United States was trying to find a balance. They wanted to help Ukraine, but they also wanted to find peace and make sure the agreement was good for the U.S. This was a challenge. It was not easy to agree on everything. One of the big questions was about the rare earth minerals. The U.S. was very interested in getting these minerals from Ukraine. Ukraine was ready to talk, but they also wanted to make sure they got enough security support in return. It was like a trade. The U.S. gives security, Ukraine gives minerals. But how much of each? This was difficult to decide. Another challenge was Russia. Russia was a big part of the problem. Ukraine wanted the U.S. to be very strong against Russia. President Trump wanted to talk to Russia to find a peaceful solution. These were different ways of thinking about Russia. It was not easy to find common ground. The talks went on for days. The people in the meeting rooms worked hard. They tried to find words that both sides could agree on. They looked at different ideas. Slowly, they started to write down some points of agreement. But there were still many things they did not agree on. The agreement talks were complex and difficult. It was not clear if they could find a final agreement that made everyone happy. 4. War and soldiers. In their discussions, both President Trump and President Zelensky spoke about the ongoing war. President Trump mentioned the many losses in the conflict. He noted that both Ukraine and Russia have experienced significant casualties. He spoke about the soldiers on both sides who are affected by the fighting. President Zelensky focused on the soldiers of Ukraine. He praised their courage and strength in defending their country. He highlighted that Ukrainian soldiers needed equipment to continue their fight. He spoke about the challenges they faced every day on the battlefield. The two leaders talked about the need to reduce the number of people hurt or killed in the war. They considered ways to stop the fighting and find peaceful solutions. President Trump and President Zelensky discussed the idea of shifting resources from military action to rebuilding efforts. They agreed that after the conflict, there would be a great need to repair and reconstruct areas damaged by war. The conversation also touched on the emotional impact of the war. Both leaders acknowledged the heavy emotional weight of the conflict, not just for soldiers, but for everyone affected. They understood that war brings difficult times and emotional challenges for families and communities. The ongoing conflict has caused much suffering and pain. President Zelensky spoke about the importance of supporting the people who have lost their homes and livelihoods due to the war. He emphasized the need for help to rebuild their lives and communities. President Trump listened and considered these points. He recognized the importance of addressing not only the fighting, but also the long-term consequences of the war on people's lives. They both understood that war has a human cost. They discussed how to minimize this cost and work towards a future where people can live in peace and safety. The discussions were serious and reflected the difficult realities of the war and its impact on soldiers and civilians alike. The focus was on finding ways to move forward, reduce suffering, and eventually build a more stable and peaceful situation for everyone involved. 5. Dealing with Russia. President Trump knew that to talk about peace, he needed to speak with Russia. So, he made phone calls to President Putin. These calls were important to try and find a way to stop the fighting. President Zelensky also had strong ideas about Russia. It was a difficult situation because Ukraine and Russia had very different views on the war. President Trump believed talking directly to President Putin was important. He thought that maybe he could find common ground. He wanted to understand Russia's goals and see if there was a way to make an agreement. Trump's approach was to be direct and try to negotiate. He wanted to find a solution that could work for everyone, or at least stop the war from continuing. He talked about the need for peace and the importance of talking to solve problems instead of fighting. These phone calls were his way of trying to start a conversation and see if peace was possible. However, President Zelensky had a very firm position. For him, Ukraine's land was the most important thing. He said many times that Ukraine would not give up any of its territory to Russia. He believed Russia was wrong to start the war and take Ukrainian land. Zelensky wanted Russia to leave all of Ukraine, including areas like Crimea. He saw Russia as the aggressor, and he felt it was important to be strong and not give in to pressure. His main goal was to protect Ukraine and its people, and he believed that meant not making any compromises with Russia about land. This difference in views made things very difficult. President Trump wanted to find a diplomatic solution, which often means both sides have to give something. But President Zelensky was not ready to give up anything when it came to Ukraine's land. This created tension. How could they find peace if Ukraine felt it could not compromise on territory, and Russia was occupying Ukrainian land? It was a big challenge to balance the need for diplomacy with Ukraine's strong feelings about its own country. Both leaders had to consider Russia's role in the war, but they saw it in very different ways. Trump wanted to negotiate with Russia, while Zelensky saw Russia as the enemy who should be pushed back. Finding a way forward was not going to be easy. 6. Business and resources. The discussions between the United States and Ukraine also included important business and resource plans. These plans looked at how both countries could work together for economic benefits. One key area was energy. There was a plan to build new terminals in Ukraine to receive liquefied natural gas, or LNG. LNG is natural gas that has been cooled down to a liquid form, making it easier to transport. Ukraine was also interested in increasing its gas storage facilities. This could help Ukraine to have more energy security and potentially become a hub for gas in the region. The United States, under President Trump, showed interest in specific sectors too. High-tech weaponry was one area. This could mean the U.S. selling advanced military equipment to Ukraine. Another area of interest for the U.S. was rare earth mining in Ukraine. Rare earth minerals are used in many modern technologies, including electronics and electric cars. Access to these resources is important for many countries. From the Ukrainian side, President Zelensky offered to share drone technology with the United States. Drones are unmanned aerial vehicles that have various uses in defense and other sectors. Sharing technology could strengthen the relationship between the two countries and offer new capabilities. These business and resource plans had the potential to bring economic advantages to both nations. For Ukraine, investments in LNG infrastructure and gas storage could lead to new jobs and strengthen its energy sector. Agreements related to weaponry and technology could also create jobs in manufacturing and related industries in both countries. For the United States, securing access to rare earth minerals and drone technology could be beneficial for its economy and defense. However, these kinds of agreements also involve risks. Investments in large projects like LNG terminals require significant funds and careful planning. Economic conditions and market prices can change, affecting the profitability of these projects. There are also risks associated with international trade and political factors that could influence the success of these business deals. Both sides needed to consider these potential risks alongside the possible rewards as they moved forward with their discussions. 7. The breaking point. The room was full of journalists. President Trump and President Zelensky stood at podiums in the Oval Office. Everyone waited for the joint press conference to start. But the atmosphere felt different today. It was not as friendly as before. President Trump spoke first. He talked about the agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine. He mentioned the good things for both countries. Then he changed his tone. He looked at President Zelensky and said, "We have done a lot for Ukraine. A lot. More than anyone." He paused and continued, "But I'm not sure if we see enough thanks for this." His words were strong. The journalists started to write quickly. President Zelensky looked surprised. President Zelensky stepped forward to speak. He started calmly. "Ukraine is thankful for the help from the United States. We know it is important." He took a breath. "But this is not only about thanks. This is about our country, about our people." He continued, "We are fighting for our land. We are losing soldiers every day. This is a very hard time for Ukraine." His voice became stronger. "We are not asking for charity. We are fighting for freedom for everyone." Vice President Vance stepped closer to President Trump. He whispered something to him, but it was too quiet to hear. President Trump did not seem to listen. He spoke again. "Gratitude is important, President Zelensky. Very important. We are talking about a lot of money, a lot of support." He looked at the journalists. "Some people are not grateful, it seems." President Zelensky answered directly, "Respect is also important, Mr. President. We respect the help. We also ask for respect for what Ukraine is going through. We are not just a business deal. We are a nation." The tension in the room was very high. You could feel it. President Vance stepped forward again. This time, he spoke to everyone. "Maybe it is better if we stop here for today." He looked serious. President Trump nodded slowly. President Zelensky looked disappointed but did not say anything more in response to President Trump's comments. "Yes," President Trump said. "We will stop this press conference." He turned and walked away from the podium. President Zelensky stood still for a moment, then followed. The joint news conference was canceled. Journalists started talking at once. What just happened? It was clear that something had broken down between the two leaders. The friendly talk seemed to be over. The future of the agreement was now uncertain. Outside the Oval Office, people wondered what this breaking point meant for peace and for the relationship between the United States and Ukraine. 8. What happens next? After the difficult press conference, the situation changed quickly. President Trump spoke about the meeting. He said that President Zelensky was not ready for peace talks right now. Trump explained that peace is important, but it needs to be the right time for everyone. President Zelensky decided to leave Washington, D.C. He thanked the American people for their welcome. However, he also showed his disappointment. The visit, which started with hope, ended with questions. Now people are asking, what happens next? The agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine is not finished. The talks about resources and security are stopped for now. It is unclear if they will continue in the future. The relationship between the two countries is uncertain. Will the U.S. and Ukraine still work together closely? Or will they take different paths? This is a big question for many countries around the world. Other nations are watching to see what will happen next between these two leaders. One possibility is peace. Perhaps after some time, both sides can find common ground again. Maybe new talks can start. Peace would be good for Ukraine, for Russia, and for the world. Many people hope that diplomacy can still work. However, there is also the risk of more conflict. If the U.S. and Ukraine cannot agree, the war in Ukraine might continue. This would mean more problems for everyone involved. It could also affect other countries and make things less stable in the world. This meeting and its results will be remembered. For President Trump, it is a moment in his leadership. People will see how he handled this difficult situation. For President Zelensky, this is also important. His actions are watched closely by Ukrainians and the international community. The future of Ukraine and its relationship with powerful countries depends on these decisions. The world is now waiting. Will there be peace or more conflict? The next steps from both leaders are very important. They will shape not only their own futures, but also the future of international relations and global peace. Many are hoping for positive developments, but the situation remains delicate and uncertain. The coming future and months will be crucial to see what happens next.